Namaskar and welcome to all. I am Umang from Policy Advocacy Research Centre and Mumbai Tarun Bharat. And I welcome you all to Bharatasya Sangeet Vishwanubandh Yatra. It is an attempt to trace the journey of Indian classical music and instruments in interrelationship with world music cultures. To talk about it with us, we have Salar Nader. Salar Nader is one of the most sought-after young percussionists of his generation. He was born in Hamburg, Germany in 1981 to his Afghan parents, who were forced to flee their homes during the Russian-Afghan War. Nader was just 5 years old when his family settled in San Francisco Bay Area, and at the age of 7, he began studying with the legendary tabla virtuoso Ustad Zakir Hussain. Nader already played tabla and was familiar with the basic rhythms of Afghan and folk Indian rhythms, along with pop music. In 2004, Salar spent 6 weeks in Mumbai, deepening his study of classical tabla. Every year, on 3rd February, artists from all over the world gather in India, in Mumbai, to pay homage to the late tabla maestro, Ustad Allah Rakha. This event proved to be an eye-opener, showing Salar just how demanding a deeply informed audience could be. These listeners were not impressed by style and showmanship, but rather content, knowledge of theory, and virtuoso execution. Salar has also been an artist in residence at following universities in the United States: University of Washington, University of Seattle, Dartmouth College, Harvard University, MIT, Cornell University, and Brandeis University. When Salar is home, he makes time to teach privately and gives tabla lessons online. Salar believes strongly in passing down the knowledge that has been shared by his guru, Ustad Zakir Hussain. He also has founded the Salar Nader Foundation, which was launched in 2019 with the support of RIA Designs. This foundation specializes in distributing music scholarships to aspiring students from all over the world. A few years back, New York Times bestseller author Khaled Hosseini and Salar collaborated on a project for the stage adaptation of his acclaimed novel, The Kite Runner. Salar Nader has composed and performed the musical score for initial 2-month run in San Jose in 2007. Salar has toured and performed extensively with a lot of legends. To name a few, we have Ustad Amjad Ali Khan, Ustad Salamat Ali Khan, Ustad Ghulam Ali Khan, and Maestro Stanley Clark. So welcome, Salar Bhai, on Bharatasya Sangeet Vishwanubandh Yatra.
Namaskar, Adab, Salam. Great to see you, Umang Bhai. Thank you for having me.
Namaste.
Good evening.
Good evening. Let me ask you to begin with, what inspired you to pursue Indian classical music, specifically the tabla?
That's a very big question. Going back about 35, 37 years, when I was first introduced to this instrument, the tabla, and one of the instruments you see behind me, which is the dholak. And so a lot of Afghan families that were fleeing the war at the time, late 70s, early 80s, the way they stayed close to culture and traditions was to sing and perform songs and sing about the homeland and whatnot. And so at that time, I was, surrounded by different instruments and songs and styles of music that was being performed by various Afghans and various styles of Afghan music. And so the tabla basically called me, and I connected with the instrument at about, I want to say, 2 to 3 years old. And, like any small infant, baby, toddler, we love drumming. You'll see a lot of children these days, percussion and playing. And there was a video cassette. My grandfather, who passed, he had this collection of Pandit Bhimsen Joshi, Ustad Muhammad Hussain Sarahang, Ustad Alara Khan, Ustad Zakir Hussain. And one of the VHS tapes he had was a performance of Ustad Zakir Hussain with Jan Gabarek, Trilo Kurtu, and El Shankar. And I believe it was a jazz festival in Stuttgart. And I used to go stand in front of the TV, like block everybody's view and watch Ustad Zakir Hussain play the tabla. I was just like completely blown away with how engrossed he was with like the moment and in the music. And so that was my first inspiration into seeing a legend perform, via the tube, the TV. And I said, I need to, I was like maybe 5 or 6 years old. I said, someone needs to take me to him. I need to find him. And one of our relatives a year later told us that he was studying with Ustad Zakir Hussain in Berkeley, California. This is 1988. So that first inspiration, that first kind of jolt happened through a VHS tape and recordings that I was listening to, and different baituks that I was invited to as a child. And anyways, I know I can go on and on about the various inspirations, but that was the initial first step, was meeting my guru through a recording.
That is wonderful. Now, how would you describe your experience of being a student of this phenomena called Indian classical music?
It's a huge blessing. You have to be really blessed in your life to receive the gift of North Indian classical music. I mean, it's self-disciplined, so for me personally, that self-discipline that comes along with studying this tradition, it can be applied to anything and anything else in life, any other career, any other pathway that you decide to walk on. When you have this tradition, this Guru Shishya Parampara, in today's times, 2023, where we have so many things we can easily be distracted by or get involved with, but yet you decide that you want to sit with your instrument in a quiet room and connect, with yourself and the instrument and the spirits. I mean, that is it's a huge blessing, and there's very few people who I think are blessed with that, or who find out that that's the path that they're gonna take in their life. And I would never exchange it for anything else in the world, really. This tradition, it's imbibed with so much into it. There's a lot of hard work that you put in, your riyaz, your practice, but it really, really fine tunes you to be able to walk out and face the world and be, who you are and exist and have an identity. And so, yeah, I'm sorry, I might be veering off from your question.
No.
But
please go on. Yes.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful tradition to be a part of, and it elevates you as a human being, just your overall vibration and who you are and who you can become when you have this. It's almost like a Marvel universe kind of secret power, I would say.
Very beautifully put. Yes. So now I would like to ask you, as a performer, what difference do you feel while performing as an accompanist and as a soloist?
Well, we have our annual retreat every year here in California, Northern California. And oftentimes we're reminded that at some aspects of the technical requirements of tabla is to work on your peshkar, your kaidas, your relas, your chakradars, guts, um, different elements in those subjects in tals and technical virtuosity. And that's so your hands can do what they need to do at any time. But also you're creating paltas, you're inventing things, creating variations. And that is, I would say, more of a soloistic mindset, right? Because here you are practicing these compositions, but the person who's hiring you for a performance, they want you to play Sida Teka or a certain style that they might be used to hearing with other accompanists they've had in the past. And I'm kind of going to quote my guru here, and it's not verbatim quoting, but he said something in class one year, and even to me, he said, it's one thing where a solo artist or a leading artist, it might be a vocalist or instrumentalist, hires you to do a performance or a concert or a one-off or a tour. But it's another thing if they call you back for the next tour, right? So that, there's a lot packed into that statement, because you as an accompanist, there's no I in team. You want to be a team player. In the Stanley Clark band, we have a pianist, he's on bass, a violinist, and everybody finds their way to make their statement within the conversation or pick a color that they can add to the overall painting. And the end result is something that people can stand and enjoy, and absorb and really appreciate. And it's less about me, when's my turn, where's my solo, and so there are multiple mindsets. There's a lot of mental and psychological kind of priming that happens to be able to kind of balance out both. And as a active performer, you want to be able to accompany vocal music, accompany dance, kathak, nrit, storytelling. You want to be able to accompany fusion of sorts, and if you have your solo thing with electronics and modern DJ elements and stuff like that, go for it. Sky's the limit. But what's really important, Umang Bhai, is that our generation, this kind of, I'm going to throw myself into the young generation, we come back to the roots. You come back to the foundation, which is your riyaz, your practice. So as long as you're not neglecting your practice and your concert preparation, that's another big one, which is, as an accompanist, whoever is hiring you or has asked you to join them, have you done your homework on them? Have you listened to all their albums, their releases? Have you gone onto YouTube and studied them? So I like to do my homework. I like to prepare, kind of like well-studied, so that I'm ready and prepared for the opportunity. So I hope that kind of...
Now, I would like to ask you again, as a performer, which is the most memorable performance till date, and which is your most fulfilling performance till date?
Wow. I don't really think about which one was the best, and because on every given day you have a different mood, a different moment in life, a different place you've arrived, a different maturity. But two special events, I would say, and I'm going to add a second because it's important for me. So, you have the Grammy Awards, you have the Oscars, you have the MTV Video Music Awards and all that kind of stuff. And then you have Abaji's Barsi. And then I also have my Gandaband ceremony with my guru. For me personally, those two moments in my life is I hate to compare. I don't like to compare the two, like an award ceremony here in the West, but it's so high up. That's what I basically trained for all my life, to have a chance to play a 20 or 25-minute solo or whatever at Abaji's Barsi. And I was invited by my teacher to do that in 2017. So 2004, I arrived to deepen my studies. And 13 years later, after watching the Barsi, I said, I need to get to this level. I need to train. So about 13 years later, performed solo at Abaji's Barsi. And then my Gandaband ceremony, where the how to say, it's not a contract. I would say it's more of like submitting yourself completely to your guru, with unconditional devotion, commitment, discipline. And that happened in 1994, and was also blessed with Ustad Salamat Ali Khan Sahab as well. So those moments for me were the most special, I would say. And then, there's a lot of amazing festivals and concerts that were, special, that I hold right here. But I think those two, for me, happen to be the most important.
Now, I would like to ask you, how do you approach improvisation in your tabla performances? And what techniques do you use to create new rhythmic patterns and variations? And if you could give us a small demo about it as well.
Sure. So, being a student of Ustad Zakir Hussain, someone who pushes the boundaries and pushes, all kind is kind of limitless in his approach to music and the possibilities. You're kind of injected with that, right? And he always asks us to not copy verbatim what he's done or what his father's done, but to try to say something in a different way. And you might take the same information, the same syllables, the same phrases, but flip-flop them or put them in reverse or whatever it is. So when I watched my teacher perform with Pandit Birju Maharaj, it was one of the first times I'd been to a Kathak performance, so storytelling dance, right? So in watching that, I was obviously watching the tabla, and I was like, well, I haven't heard this phrase before. I haven't heard this combination before. I haven't heard this sound effect before. And so what that did was, it kind of, some light bulbs went off. And when I wound up in the rehearsal studio for the Kite Runner, which is literally theater, and in theater, I became the sole musician on stage. And as sole musician, I have various tablas tuned to different pitches, various percussion instruments, but the tabla became another voice on stage and another character on stage. And you also have these 18, 19 actors, most of which who have never seen a tabla in their life, let alone heard the sound. So on paper, it was like, how is this going to work, right? So I think with the skills and the tools and information that Zakirji provided, I was able to go into my toolkit and kind of create these different moments and transitions. And you're in Kabul in 1977 and there's a kite fighting tournament. How would those kite fly? How do they sound when they're taking off? There's a red kite, a blue kite, a yellow kite. So different tablas, maybe different tablas kind of doing little harmonies and patterns that depict the kite runners and whatnot. So I think that there's still a lot that can be done with this instrument. It's still being discovered. The tonal possibilities, the phraseology, the syllables, it's really a limitless instrument. And so yeah, that's kind of my kind of take on my first taste of innovating within tradition, which is theater. I can't hear you. You're on mute. Oh, it's still muted.
That's wonderful. Yes. I would like you to demonstrate something for us with in terms of a regular tal and the improvisation that you do, or something that you play as an improvisation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. 16 beats, North Indian classical. But if I'm supposed to play something that's a 4/4 rhythm, and let's say I'm supposed to be playing that with Stanley Clark, who's on bass, and it is a 4/4 piece, I'm not going to be playing teen thought. So I'm probably going to be playing, if it's at the same click, and we're doing a song called, I think it's Brazilian. So that's just kind of you said improvise and whatnot, but that's one
Lovely.
way where you can take the 16 and kind of figure out ways to express it with kind of like a Latin vibe mixed in. There's a song called Brazilian Love Affair by George Duke, and we usually do that. And I come in at the top and introduce the rhythm. And I said, well, Teen Tal it's one of the tals I love, and it's one of the tals we love studying. But that may not be the tal that is going to work here. So how can I make some adjustments to how the bayan is used, the different sliding tones, the dipping tones, the attack, and how can this sound tak can become almost like a conga technique here, right? Right? So, there's many recordings where my teachers also played different versions of this.
I'd like to ask you, do you incorporate traditional Afghan music into your tabla playing? And what techniques do you use to blend these two musical styles?
No, absolutely. So I am a hybrid. I mean, I grew up playing North Indian classical music, but also all the various traditional ghazal styles, light classical, and classical styles of music that comes out of Afghanistan. So, we have so many different traditions of music. We have Pashto tradition, Herati tradition, the music of Mazar, music of Logar, Logari music. So all of these different styles of music, which are named after the provinces and territories have their own sound. They have their own type of rhythm. And I can definitely demonstrate a couple of those after I speak about them. But just this summer, when I was making my Broadway debut, I opened the show with a North Indian classical tabla solo, traditional tabla solo. But within the story, I'm also playing Logari rhythms on the tabla and also Pashto rhythms on the tabla. And so, it's being able to think fast and make those adjustments because you're also in a location that asks for that sound. So I adjust my playing, and also being having worked with all the vocalists who come from Afghanistan. They all have different singing styles. Someone might be singing the traditional style of ghazal, or Ustad Zaland, who's one of the performers that I'd perform with. He was a composer and performer. And so he would sing Farsi ghazals. So I had to learn how to accompany his ghazals, which were different than, let's say, Ghulam Ali Ji's ghazals or Hariharan Ji's ghazals. So, knowing that, okay, these are the same mathematical rhythms, but if I were to play the style I would play with a Ghulam Ali Ji ghazal, which would be, it might not work with the Ustad Zalan song, which wants. So in Afghanistan, we call this tapia. It's 4 beats. It kind of starts like Rupak Dal. And if you go from Tapia to Pashto or Kandahar or the south, different than a dadra that I would play, for instance, if I was playing with Rakesh Chaurasia ji, would be. I mean, you see the. This is called Tingla in the Pashto tradition. Similarly, we have different tals in Logari music, and another tal called Mughali, which is also a 7, and also Kataghani. So I can go through these and give you little sound bites. Folk tradition, Kataghani, but in the same click, I would be going. Bhajani Teka, if I'm playing with a bhajan singer. So, you go up about 700 miles, 1,000 miles, or whatever the distance is to Kabul. So the lagis are still very similar. Now, what I should mention is that we do have various court musicians who came from North India and settled in Afghanistan in the 1800s under the time of Amir Sher Ali Khan. I mean, this is what I've heard, this is what I've learned. There could have been some musicians that came before that time, but Ustad Muhammad Singh Sarahang's father, Ustad Ghulam Hussain, and then Chacha Mahmud was a very famous tabla player, and they referred to him as Chacha Mahmud. And so he also played, North Indian classical traditions, and then their music was also infused with the different elements of course, what was happening musically in Kabul. And I personally don't have enough information on that and what happened during that time, but what it did do is gave birth to a lot of singers who came in the line after Ustad Sarahang, which is his son, Ustad Altaf Hussain or Ustad Sharif Ghazal, who sing traditional Farsi repertoire and Dari repertoire and even Pashto, but also can sing North Indian classical from, Bade Khiyal, Choti Khiyal, Tumri, Ghazal, all of that.
Wow, that's lovely. That was that was a quick insight into the history of how tabla has evolved in Afghanistan as well. Now, since you have worked with a stage adaptation of a novel on Broadway theatre, I would like to ask you, what role do you think tabla and other traditional Indian instruments can play in modern Broadway productions? And how can they add to the overall musical experience?
First of all, any instrument that is coming onto the Broadway scene nowadays, which isn't your traditional keyboard, piano, violin, guitar, and being utilized for a musical or a theatrical stage play that happens to be from our part of the world, and specifically northern Indian classical traditions or even South, is a huge benefit to the audience because they get an opportunity to finally see how those sounds are produced, which they've been used to seeing, and either if they've watched a Bollywood film and they're a Western audience and had never been exposed to uh, these beautiful traditions. So I think that it's a amazing step that Broadway took in the last summer, which was to have these instruments in front of 50 to 60 to 70,000 theater goers that were coming in every night. It is huge because you don't see the instruments you think of in Europe, in the West, is your go-to is guitar, bass, you know, um, piano, and whatnot. And I absolutely love those instruments. But I also love to see the inclusion of other cultures and the celebration of other traditions. And so I think it's a win-win for everybody, performers, artists, instrument makers, and it should be happening. I mean, we look at New York and California as the melting pot for all these various cultures, and to have that opportunity and the blessing to be able to, make my debut, but also make the debut with the tabla as a sole instrument and a feature that was huge. And I think the gates and the doors have been unlocked to many others. I mean, if someone is coming out with just a sitar, it can. I mean, we have sitar solo concerts in other parts of the world, which are like 2 hours long, 2.5 hours long. So why shouldn't it be featured within a performance or a theatrical adaptation? It's just it all comes back down to um, Guru's blessings, what you've learned, how you apply it, um, and also, having a New York Times best-selling novel helps as well.
That really paints quite a picture. Yes. Now, I would like to ask you, how do you maintain a balance between honoring the traditional Indian roots of tabla while also exploring new sound and possibilities within the context of Broadway theatre?
Right. So this is a very important question, obviously, because the I was talking about self-discipline earlier and how we treat our instrument and how um, you know in our traditions we never step on the stage with our shoes. It's a
Mhm.
big deal um, for us. But I mean, over the summer, I did this performance for, it was called Broadway Con, and it was a panel discussion. And once I got done speaking, the host asked me, "Well, could you play a solo for us now and whatnot?" And I said, "Well, hold on one second. I need to take off my shoes." And what happened was, we have about 1,500 people sitting in the audience. And the host is like, he literally, I think, asked, why do you have to take off your shoes?" So once I sat down, I had to explain why. I mean, it's pretty easy for me to think about it because, you're walking around the city in your shoes, you're walking into different public restrooms and all that kind of stuff. And then to bring that near something so sacred is like, it's a total no-no. So for me, it's a no-brainer, but for some, these days, there's that educational aspect of tabla playing, and being a practitioner of this tradition is to make sure that those people who are around it and those people who are going to take on this tradition understand that there's you don't just pick it up and play it when you want and then just toss it to the side. You don't step over it ever. And it's your best friend, right? I mean, it's one of the best friends you can have in the world. It lets you know how you feel, and hopefully if it responds to the way you touch and connect with it, it'll sing for audiences and make people feel uh, even better. I know I kind of veered off your question, but to take, there's some films that are coming in these days that I give music for, some collaborative projects like that'll ask me, well, we're doing this festival, but it's outdoors, and we have a bar on the side that's people are want to party and they want to do their thing. And that's where I need to make the decision. Does the tabla want to be in that type of setting? Maybe the exposure is massive for the instrument, but will the future karma that I get from that situation, affect what I really want to do in my life, and how I want to live my life, and how I want to walk the life of a practitioner of this instrument? And so I always ask, will there be, these type of things served at this festival? Or if it's happening miles away, that's a whole nother thing. But the music is so rich and the tradition is so rich in itself that the natural high that people receive from the vibrations is more than enough to send someone into all out ecstasy or completely calm them down and put someone into a meditative state. Um, and so I'm very picky and choosy with, where I go and where I take the instrument and how it is presented, the actual instrument. Like, for instance, even staging, you don't just put the tabla on the floor. You never do that. So anyways, these are things that with every inquiry that is not a classical concert, I, have to dot my I's and cross my T's and ask the team, like, hey, did they tell us, where the tabla is going to be set? How is it going to be presented? All that stuff. Is the rug clean? What's going on? So, these are very, very, it might seem like, oh, well, why? But no, this is extremely important before you touch the instrument. I mean, all of these elements, the room needs to be in tune, the space needs to be clean, and only then will the music be able to really, convey, and the player be able to also convey with the instrument what the message is. So, yeah, that's a modern day thing that we're all dealing with.
That's absolutely thoughtful of you, and it really shows how deeply engrossed and encompassed that you are with Indian classical music and Indian culture.
Hmm.
Now, I would like to ask you, as an Afghan-American musician, what challenges have you faced playing Indian classical music, and how have you navigated through these challenges?
Oh, okay. Um, I I've been really, really blessed in my life. And I say that with like just going back, let's say 20, 25, 30 years, and meeting Ustad Sultan Khan Sahab through my teacher, meeting Ustad Salamat Ali Khan Sahab, um, meeting Rahul Sharma ji, Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma's son, and performing with him. I used to always, growing up, I said, I have to learn Hindi, otherwise I'm not going to understand. Like, if the performer is speaking Hindi and they need to tell me something like, okay, speed up, slow down, tune your instrument, do this or do that. And so I kind of, when in sitting with Sultan Khan Sahab, kind of slowly started picking up, okay, this means to tune your instrument, or this means to, pick up the tempo and whatnot. And so, and also you get that through studying the body language of the soloist, right? So there were certain things that, because there was that language barrier. I mean, here I am, young 12-year-old kid growing up in California watching MTV. There's hip hop going on, electronic music, house music, EDM, and then like, I was also a gamer. So I did all that stuff and played sports, soccer, basketball, this and that. But then I was chosen to do this. And so being able to communicate with like a legendary artist, I communicated more through my playing, and then slowly but surely, I remember my teacher, Ustad Zakir Hussain, said, you should try to learn some Hindi so you can at least get by in a situation where you need to communicate via the language. And luckily, almost 99% of musicians also speak English. So we have a common ground. So that was, I would say that was one, I wouldn't even call it a challenge, but it was like early on, it kind of gave me a little bit of anxiety as a child, as a teenager. But then that, I think a lot of that washed away the more I practiced, and the more someone had a chance to hear and said, well, you know what, this kid, this guy is actually pretty good, like we should take him out. So that built my confidence, that built my self-esteem, kind of my self-worth to myself. And so I would say language barrier was one of the bigger challenges. I mean, in recent times, as an Afghan, it's really sad to see that within the country, music has been completely banned currently. And so that really hurts. And that's why we look up some of these vocalists and instrumentalists and people who want to practice tabla, and get in touch with them via Zoom or whatever it is, and bring them in so they can still continue to irrigate and water their flower. And so that's something I'm dealing with heavily on a daily basis with a lot of my interactions with young aspiring musicians. um, and to not have like an ancestral country that I can go back to and share what I've learned in India, it's a little I mean, it is a little sad. So that has become more of a recent challenge. But I would say there's always, 250 some odd countries where I still get to go and where we're still celebrated as performers, practitioners, and artists. And so I'm going to continue um, doing my riyaz and tapasya and continuing my fight through my music wherever it's needed or wherever it's invited.
It is disheartening, but there are, like at the end of the tunnel, there is this light, it's hope of light. That hope of light is you at the moment for so many musicians. And we are thoroughly grateful to you for that.
My pleasure and my honor.
Now, I'd like to ask you a question as a composer. How do you see the role of tabla evolving in contemporary music, both within Indian classical and other music genres?
Mhm. So I so there's the Kite Runner, and then there's a lot of films and documentary series where I've been invited to give different musical cues for or compose for or music and dance. And so the way I like to start out a sketch or a rough sketch is sometimes I'll be on the key. So I also play keyboard. I also harmonium I do play. There's some vocal that I do as well. So there's different Sufiana traditions of Afghanistan and North India and Qawwalis and whatnot that I've always loved listening to. So all of that's been kind of imbibed in me with the jazz traditions, hip hop, rap, and then now you have, EDM and whatnot. So there's so many different traditions that can inspire a scene or a director to say, "Hey, I want to work with this guy. I mean, he's a practitioner of the tabla, but I've heard him give music in this film and it sounded so interesting and different." And so I think for a tabla player composer, um, really sky's the limit because we've grown up hearing and listening to everything as a accompanist, right? So you've been absorbing everything, absorbing all this information, and having also lived in Los Angeles, you're exposed to these incredible projects and composers and percussionists who are composing for film or drummers who are composing for film. And I think it was like, what was it? One of the recent Batman movies had like 12 drum kits or 18 drum kits in one scene. And of course, you have my teacher who's composed for ballet, the Atlanta Olympics, Alonzo King's Lions Ballet. So having that blueprint was really important. So you have a blueprint, and for me personally, the blueprint is Ustad Alaraka Khan Sahab, Ustad Salamat Ali Khan Sahab, Ustad Zakir Hussain, Maestro Stanley Clark, who's given music for I think 100 films now, and so we might be sitting behind this instrument, but there's a lot of other music that um, is in each individual, and you never know, what is going to come out of an individual. And so there was one particular documentary film which was for UFC, for Ronda Rousey. At the time, she was the UFC champion, female champion, and she was fighting in Brazil. And one of her trainers, Hiron Gracie of the Jiu-Jitsu family from Brazil, the Gracie family, had seen me playing dole at one of my cousin's wedding processions. So since it was my cousin, I said, "Give me the dole." So I played the dole. When I got done playing the dole, he approached me and said, "Do you compose for film?" I said, "Yeah, sure. I mean, what's the film about?" He said, "It's about UFC and Ronda Rousey, and we're training in Brazil, and then the fight's upcoming." So we want something that has the what you did tonight and how we saw the audience respond to that. So obviously the music that I ended up writing for that was different. It was There's some electronic elements, some different pads involved, some vocal music that I did gave as well. And then I built a lot of things around the tabla. So there was pakawaj, frame drum, dholak, dhol, and tabla. So I think the possibilities are endless. The possibilities are endless. I mean, the only thing that can stop a tabla player or a sitar player or a young sarangi maestro from wanting to compose for TV, film, and commercials and all that is themselves, if they put that limit on themselves. So, the mind is a powerful thing. If you say you can do it and you approach it with that energy, you really might come out with something, magical, or you might come out with something that maybe the director likes or asks you to revise, and that's how you learn.
Wow, that is really wonderful. So, guys, this was Salar Nader from America. He is an Indian classical tabla player, and he spoke about his journey about tabla as an instrument and its future ventures as well. So, thank you, Salar Bhai, for joining us
Thank you.
and enlightening us with the tradition of tabla and your take on it. So
Pleasure.
this was Salar Nader for Bharatasya Sangeet Vishwanubandh Yatra. This project is in association with the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. Now, I would like to ask Salar Bhai to play something for us which is close to his heart.
Thank you, Mayung Bai, and thank you everybody for having me for this interview. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope play a couple minutes of a minute or two of Teen Tal.
Thank you so much, Salar Bhai. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely my pleasure, Umang Bai.